Hello, I'm Colleen Marr, and welcome to another edition of Inside Fanwood. Today, I really have the pleasure of sitting and having a wonderful conversation about our community with people that I consider colleagues and friends. Joining me today is our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Maz, the co-founder of Social Justice, Leland McGee, and my friend and mayor right down the street, Mayor Al Smith of Scotch Plains. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome. So while you may know each of us individually as being leaders in our community, what we have done that you may not be aware of is that we have come together over the last 6 months to start to have a conversation about race, about living together in harmony in Scotch Plains and Fanwood, about inclusion, about education, and racial healing. And so to that end, we got together probably within the last year after a result of a couple incidences that have been going around in our community, that we realized that there was a broader conversation that as leaders who are responsible really for the health and well-being of our two communities to have. And out of that came the formation of a committee. And that committee is a joint committee for truth, racial healing, and transformation. So today we're going to have what I think is going to be a great conversation about how each of us are doing our part individually and collectively to bring this conversation and narrative into our community. So Leland, why don't we start with you? You're a co-founder of Social Justice Matters.
Yes.
Just talk a little bit about Social Justice Matters, because I want to give people the opportunity to understand that we actually have this organization in town before we move on to the bigger conversation.
Sure. In 2009, there was a racial incident in particularly Fanwood where flyers were distributed in people's driveways. As a result of that, people in the community were pretty incensed. They went to the ministerium, they contacted a few of us in the community. And the ministerium sponsored a group discussion at St. John's Baptist Church that was facilitated by the U.S. Department of Justice. As a result of that, a small group of people agreed to continue the conversation. Rabbi Joel Abraham and I agreed to sort of be the impetus for keeping it, moving it forward. And 9 folks got together and went through 18 hours of training on how to facilitate discussions about race. Right. And so in about 2014, we began partnering with the Scotch Plains Library and began to expand our work. So to date, we do conversations amongst ourselves, the community. Right. We do those conversations based on articles and lectures and presentations.
So you've been in the community doing this now for a couple of years.
Yes, we have.
So the idea of creating another group, which I think we could have probably easily done an offshoot of Social Justice Matters to maybe have these conversations, but that's not what you wanted to do.
No. So the Kellogg Foundation in 2015 or so created an initiative, Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. And they invested money to bring communities together. And one of the things, and I'd like to read it, one of the things that they believe in is that, they say, we recognize that advancing racial equity exerts a powerful, positive influence on the lives and futures of children. And we thought that that was an excellent model for us to follow. So the funds that they invested went to the American Library Association, about 12 communities around the country, and to the American Association for Colleges and Universities. As a result of the latter, Rutgers University in Newark became a TRHT center, right? Because funds were allocated to them to move that initiative forward in New Jersey and in this region. So there are 10 universities around the country that are centers.
So we're lucky to have.
Oh, we are. We are. And they were very eager to work with us as a partner in putting together this committee.
So what I want our community to to be educated about is that when we say we have a community for truth, racial healing, and transformation, that is the name that other communities are
Yes.
using across the United States
Yes.
to have these conversations.
This is a national effort
Right.
that Kellogg has spearheaded.
So I'm going to just come over to Dr. Mass and welcome. And welcome, because I think you're probably now our superintendent for a handful of months at this point.
Since August 1st.
There you go. There you go. Well, we want to thank you for being here today. But I think more broadly, we want to thank you for really being a part of this joint committee. As we listened to Leland read a little bit about the why, it struck me about education and children. You know, so which is why I think we're so glad that you really are a part of this in our community. Talk a little bit about, you know, why you agree to be a part of our committee and be a part of these conversations that we want to have going forward.
Okay. Well, first, just as I stepped into the superintendency, one of the things I was most excited about were community assets. And one of the community assets was this group coming together, the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. Because having been in the district for 20 years, I was aware that there was work to do. And the school, being an asset of the community, needed the community's help. So knowing that this partnership had formed was very exciting to me.
That's great.
And I also know, in speaking to our administration and student leadership groups, that they were excited too about extending the conversation around race, diversity, and equity.
So let's talk a little bit about that, right? Because I think that part of why the committee was formed and why we partnered, you know, came out of Kellogg, partnered with Rutgers, is that we need to prepare ourselves, right? We need to educate each of ourselves that are going to be viewed as leaders of a conversation about understanding exactly what's happening in our community, not necessarily looking the other way or not necessarily continuing to say that these are just one-offs or that they're just isolated incidents. And we find ourselves, at least I find myself publicly stating that we seem to have more of these isolated incidences. And so, you know, Mayor, welcome.
Thank you.
You know, and really glad anytime that the two mayors can and the two towns can work together is a benefit, I think,
Yes.
for the whole community. So,
Yes.
just briefly talk to me about your motivation and
Well,
you know,
the,
no hesitation about joining.
No, in fact, I was very eager when I heard the formation of the committee. And just for everybody to know, it is a formal committee
Right.
in Fanwood, Scotch Plains, and with the Board of Ed, we've all passed resolutions.
That's a very
We
good
all
point.
have you know, liaisons behind ourselves. And why I got involved is, you know, as I became involved in politics and ran for office, it just became clear to me that there was still barriers that needed to be broken down. And that as I became mayor and these various incidences would take place, we just, you know, find them and you're frustrated. What can you do? And so I was very glad when Leland and Social Justice Matters came forward with the program, because what I've seen of it so far in my participation, it's a good program. These, you know, the racial healing part of it, of getting people to talk to one another, to realize the more commonalities we have than the differences, is going to be a very important part of the program, I think. So I'm very excited about it. We'll support it whatever way I can, and we'll participate in whatever way I can.
So why don't we talk a little bit about, now that I think our community, you know, can understand we've formally created a committee and that we've been working for months on educating ourselves, kind of addressing our own biases, right? You know, addressing, you know, how you can look at somebody and how maybe you don't see them or you don't hear them just because you're predisposed to your own, you know, ways that you think. So Leland, let's talk a little bit about what's next, right? So we meet on a pretty regular basis, you know, as the mayor said. We're guided, you know, by Rutgers University. That was so nice to help us. Sharon Stroh has been a real asset to us. And but I think we're ready to, you know, talk more publicly about where we're going with this committee and what we envision.
Sure. So one of the, as you mentioned, part of our objective up until now has been an internal growth process and developing a relationship among ourselves and an understanding among ourselves. Our next step is to take that and become public and community facing. And so one of the things we're beginning to plan for are a series of community conversations so that we can get input from the community about how they see activities that would help them to become more informed and become more comfortable with these conversations. We have had some conversations with our police chiefs, for example, who have been very supportive of this effort and very much interested in engaging in the conversation. And one of our meetings, TRHT committee meetings, we will meet with them to talk a little bit about community policing and some of the, what the lenses are that shape how people conduct themselves when they interact with the police. We're looking to create different forms of opportunities for people's engagement. We're looking to bring a play to our community that will spark conversation about inequity. We are looking at developing relationships with high school students. We have a project now, actually, Social Justice Matters, is working with high school students in Linden. And the students put together these graphic novellas that address racial dynamics and conversations. And those provide opportunities for students to engage in the conversation, but also opportunities for them to interact with adults and the rest of the community.
So, Superintendent, you know, you play such an integral part of this conversation, you know, both internally amongst the group, but then when we go externally with this, because we share a joint school system. Talk to me about, you know, what you hope to see, what you want to see. You know, there's a hope, and then there's what we need, the conversations that we need to have based on, you know, sort of what you're seeing and hearing in the school district. Especially, I think, whether it's in our high school or if we're seeing, you know, incidents or conversations that we need to go down a little into the junior highs, you know, I'm sort of open to hear your thoughts.
So I think one place that I've noticed to start is the state of New Jersey has the HIPPA laws, the harassment, intimidation, and bullying.
Right.
And through that law, a lot of cases come to me for the superintendent's review. And often it's predictable conflict between children. But on occasion, there is hate language embedded in it. And in those cases, what I learned in this short period of time, that it's really difficult to unpack, you know, a child's error and connect it to racism. It requires talking to families of all involved. So the skill set just to talk about race and racism and hate and historical horrific events like slavery is such a huge undertaking, and we haven't done that as a country. As a district, we're poised to do it very well with our partnership and with the concerns of our community members, but it's daunting work that needs to be done.
Mayor, your thoughts on what you're hearing?
Well, again, you know, I think that what I hear throughout the community is that people are concerned. When the last racial incident that we had,
Not that long ago, as we sit here
just
today.
a few weeks ago?
2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I mean, you know, we sent a letter out. There was a lot of activity on social media. I mean, on my Facebook page, when I made my statement that I was appalled about what happened, that was one of the most joined in the conversations that I've had in 2 years, 3 years that I've had that up. So I think there is concern in the community. I think and I think they're looking for leadership, and hopefully our group will provide that, is how do you address it? How do you go forward? How do we do this in a way that we all come together in a manner that we don't create more divide, but we bring people together and have the conversation?
Right, and that's a really good segue into like a healing circle. So before joining this, I will tell you that I really wasn't sure what a healing circle was.
Same here. Yeah.
You know, and its purpose and how you can have one about race and try to be truthful without it devolving, right? Or how you start a conversation and then it kind of gets hijacked and it goes into another direction, and bringing it back, especially if you're in a larger group with strong opinions on this. So I know that that's going to be our goal, is to come out with some of these healing circles. And so maybe you can, Leland, talk a little bit about that piece of it, you know, so that when we start to promote that we're going to have them, maybe give people a sense of what it is and what it's not.
So in a healing circle, the word race may never come up. Its objective is for us to explore our common humanity. And so the questions and the conversations focus around those common humanities. And so it is very, I've not seen that conversation devolve because it's not political. We don't talk about politics. We talk about persons,
Right.
and what things in our experiences we share. And so the healing circles are really just an opportunity for people to feel each other, to engage
Empathy.
right. It's an exercise in empathy, an exercise in how do we break down the barrier in a very safe space to looking at who I'm talking with on a daily basis, or I run into in the cleaners, and how do I engage with them differently based upon what I now know through this conversation. I would add that people will also see advertisements for something called dialogue circles, which are different.
Okay.
And SJM is presenting dialogue circles through an organization called ARC. It's a partnership with the Martin Luther King Jr. Association in Westfield. And dialogue circles are a conversation about race through literature. And so they are trained facilitators who engage diverse groups in conversation about Langston Hughes' writings and articles, and basically unpack what the dynamics are in the literature that we're reading and how that applies to us as a community. And so it's a different opportunity for people to engage in a safe place in a conversation. But the healing circles are, and so the dialogue circles are a series. They're a 5-part series. The healing circles are individualized.
And do you think our community is going to be able to participate in both of those types?
Absolutely, absolutely. I encourage everyone to participate in both.
And so, Superintendent, how do you see your role now as we're ready to go forward, you know, as the committee, you know, to sort of organize these events? You know, your community, right, is the educational community. Our community, you know, is our residents, you know. You have an opportunity to kind of talk more towards the teachers and the students, you know, you'll have that ability. What do you think that looks like to you?
You know, I envision the healing circles to be all of us, so students and parents and community members. In fact, the more diverse the circle, the richer the opportunity for us to break down barriers and to understand each other. I think my role is certainly to encourage people to participate, to bring models in so they can see the power of those conversations.
Because we're shaping the future, right? We're shaping the future generation in those hallways and in those classrooms, throughout our two communities. And it's so important, right? Especially in this age where there's so much more that comes at us all the time, with social media, the 24/7, discussions, the fact that if something happens, you're almost expected to immediately respond, where sometimes it's better that you don't immediately respond, right, Mayor?
Right. And let me just pick up on what you said about uncertainty about what we were getting into in the healing circles. I mean, having gone through some initial training, very excited to see the positive benefits that come from it. And again, from my perspective here, my job is to help promote this, help the community understand what we're doing, why they want to do it, why they want to participate in it, and make us a better community. Not that we're not a good community. I mean, I hear people saying they move here because of the community, but we're trying to make it better.
Right.
We're trying to bring it to that highest level. And so, from where I'm sitting here, I'm glad to hear what's going on in the school systems, and anything I can do or we can do as a group to make this happen. That's what I look at as my role.
Right, and I think as we sort of wrap up our conversation on this, you bring us back to a good point. We love our communities. We are choosing to raise our families here, choosing to send our children to the public school and get that education. We choose to get involved in many different ways through volunteers, running for office, going up, when we see something we don't like. And I think that I'm excited as well to step forth with all of you, because that's what we're doing. We're going to all step forth together, shoulder to shoulder, in a community that we're vested in and that we love. And it's going to be okay to come together and to work through some of the issues that bring forth some racial inequality without looking the other way or looking past it. So I want to thank each and every one of you.
Thank you for having us.
Coming and sitting down and having a conversation that I think merits our attention and our interaction with our community.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.